How do you get millennials more involved in the political process? To vote? To run for office? Well, somebody who's been covering that for the Asbury Park Press is Susanne Cervenka, who is a reporter for the Press and also writes for APP.com. First of all, let's define millennial. You hear the term thrown around all the time. What's a millennial?
So it's one of those really undefined terms, but generally speaking, it's the millennial generation started about 1980, 1981. Some people will use 18 to 29 as a cutoff, but that 80, 81 is about 33 is the upper limit.
So 18 to 33, you're saying. Is that what you used as a millennial when you did your reporting?
Myself, I'm I guess, early leading millennial, and I consider myself millennial, depending on the trend, I guess.
Oh, and so your story, I know that it's multifaceted, but let's talk about one part of it, and that is both the Republicans and the Democrats going after the millennial vote. That's become active now.
Sure, and we were looking at Monmouth County, and both were kind of declaring themselves the party of the future generation. But when I started talking with researchers, what's happening in Monmouth County is actually something that's happening a little more broadly across the country.
Across the country, and I'll tell you, what I think is the reason for that, and you can tell me if your research has found that it used to be that the youth vote, the millennial vote in this case, was fool's gold. Everybody talked about getting it, and everybody thought they had it, and polls showed, wow, we have 60% of the youth vote, and then the youth wouldn't vote. Sure. They would never come out to vote. That changed with President Obama. It
did change with President Obama. It's still somewhat true in the midterms in 2014. Only about 22% of millennials voted. And the recent Harvard youth poll, they asked 18 to 24-year-olds, 18 to 29-year-olds, would they participate in a political campaign. Only about a third of them said they would. But they are engaged in just civic participation. If you ask them if they'd volunteer in their community, 2/3 would.
So are they turned off to politics? Is that the reason?
In part, I think they don't identify with one party or the other. So there was a recent Gallup poll that they asked millennials, okay, so what party are you? And they say they're independent. When you probe them a little bit further, they tend to lean more towards a Democrat, but it's not a given. It's not a guarantee that, oh, you're young, you're going to vote Democratic, because in that same Harvard youth poll, that millennial age group skewed more towards, they preferred, by a couple percentage points, they preferred the GOP.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I know Ron Paul and now Rand Paul
yes.
for the Republicans have been courting and really have excited the youth vote in the country. But I don't think it's going to be enough for Rand Paul. But he does seem to get the youth vote. I will tell you, to your point, my son, who is a millennial, voted for President Obama twice and was completely turned off by him because of NSA.
Yeah.
And that was his issue. Because, and you tell me if it's true, the millennials seem to live on the internet. So something that affects the internet, affects them directly.
Sure, and you're starting to see that with national politicians. You saw Ted Cruz make his announcement that he's running for president via Twitter. And Hillary Clinton is also doing the same thing. Her announcement is in social media. Now, the rest of the world, or the rest of the generations, we're talking about days ahead, she's going to announce, but the official announcement is coming up through social media.
Aside from, we mentioned Rand Paul, do you see anybody in the political scene right now that can inspire millennials?
It's almost, I think it's almost millennials inspiring millennials themselves. Because what I've talked with researchers, they say, yes, you're going to come out, millennials are engaged. People will talk about selectivism, and they will do they'll help the community, but in the least way possible with the ice bucket challenge, but that's not necessarily the case. You do see them going out and volunteering. You do see them finding their own solution to what they see as problems. Now, and there's not the research quite yet there to back it, but there's kind of an indication that when they're hitting a wall through their own volunteerism, then maybe they are realizing to make long-term institutional changes, we do have to go to the political route. And this researcher, in particular from Rutgers, seems to think that as we go along in time, we may see more millennials becoming more engaged in politics because
But as we go through time, they won't be millennials anymore.
Exactly.
And so I will have to see it. I have a feeling that the last two presidential elections with Obama, they were anomalies. I have a feeling that it's difficult to get millennials engaged. And so
Sure.
I may be wrong, and your research seems to show that there is hope, but I'll be pleasantly surprised if they come out and vote in this next election. Do you see anything in your reporting that makes you believe that they really are coming out this time?
Sure, actually, I think they would, in particular because as the millennials age, they're in their careers. They're looking for work full time. That's actually one of the draws, I think, for Rand Paul, is that he's speaking about economic issues in terms of millennials. And then, but also as you see them age, they're buying houses. They're starting to feel the impact of the political system through taxes and other economic drivers.
But then they're not millennials anymore. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. I appreciate you coming in,
Thank
and
you.
we look forward to reading your reporting.
Great.
Susanne Cervenka, who is with the Asbury Park Press, and you can read her reporting on millennials on app.com. Stick around, another thing continues right after this.